Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. In the first story, our OP encountered a very picky client. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. When I say no salt, I mean it. So this was well before COVID, so I might be fuzzy on the details as it was back when I worked at a burger joint in the middle of a small city. A small one, but it gave me a chuckle, and I was reminded of it after reading an earlier post about someone falsely claiming a salt-free diet for a party. Some dude walks in with the most condescending look on his face as he looks around our establishment. We advertised as a place which catered to dietary needs including vegetarian, vegan, organic, and religious diets. And this dude at least doesn't look like the type such a place caters to, but I don't get paid to judge. He orders a typical burger, the joint's default, but with no salt on the patties. Not a problem, people have done this before. We easily prepare an unsalted double patty burger. This time, however, when he bites in, his face is a look of disgust. Me. Is something wrong, sir? Customer. There's way too much salt on this burger. Me. That's strange, we didn't put any salt on your burger as you asked. Customer. As if. When I say no salt, I mean it. I'm on a no-salt diet as per my doctor's orders. Me. Oh, really? Well, why didn't you say that to begin with? Let me just make a new burger for you. Our place had special policies the moment a medical history or specific diet was mentioned. 4 minutes later, handing him back a lettuce-wrapped double patty with no pickles or bacon. Customer. The F is this crap? This isn't a burger. Me. Actually, sir, that's a properly salt-free burger as you requested. Customer. But there's not even a bun. Me. Our burger buns are made with salt. Customer, now studying the burger closely. Where are the toppings I asked for? Me. Our bacon and pickles are both heavily salted. Since your salt-free request is a result of dietary restriction, not just a request, we're obligated to remove any substances of the ingredient in question. Don't worry, we didn't charge you for the bacon. The customer then bit into the burger, stating that it was terrible. Not just that the lettuce wrap was far inferior, but the meat was tasteless. Well, I'm sorry, sir, but not only did you ask for no salt, hence the tasteless, you triggered our establishment's dietary policy by making a request based on medical need. My manager had to explain to him that if he wanted a new burger, he'd have to pay for it. I love when people make up a medical condition to get special treatment, and it bites them in the butt. And our next story. But what about the inheritance? So this is a long, old story involving my mom's aunt, all circulating since my mom's mom, my grandma, passed away. Note to this story, I'll refer to them as my aunt and uncle as the only names I've known them as, and this is an important note on why money ruins families. So background on my grandma. My grandma was the result of her parents having sex before marriage when it was not acceptable, which forced my great-grandparents to get married. Growing up, there was a lot of resentment to my grandma and a large amount of abuse, which did carry over to my grandma's brother, who was the golden child and I know as uncle. My grandma was pretty much told as soon as she was old enough she needed to get married so that she'd no longer be their problem. Soon as my grandma turned 18, she got married into her own abusive marriage. Soon as my grandma left him, she was left with nothing and had to go home to her parents. During this time in her life, her own parents made it aware that once she was married, she was her husband's problem and had changed their will so that the only person getting any money should they die would be uncle. My grandma's upset, but accepts it anyway. Take 10 years later, my grandma is remarried to my grandfather who treats her right, but they struggle to get pregnant, while her brother is married to his wife who's gloating that each time my grandparents come home after having a stillborn, she has a perfectly healthy baby, with each nursery for said child paid for by both grandparents. Just after the last gloat, my grandma gives birth to my mom, and both uncle and aunt worry about the inheritance after great-grandfather's health takes a swan dive. Great-grandfather passes away, and apart from a cheap pocket watch my grandma gets, she's left out of the will or any of the money given, while uncle is literally gloating about how he can now afford his dream house. My grandma cuts a large amount of contact out through the amount of hurt they're causing. Fast forward now 15 years, and my great-grandmother's health is in real decline, and Uncle and Aunt are talking about divorce as they'd spent the money great-grandfather had left them and her own parents' money. My grandparents were freaking out at this point about her declining health and making sure she's not in pain, while Aunt openly says she hopes she doesn't pass away as she needs cash. Yep, classy people. Anyway, great-grandmother, before she passes away, tells my grandmother that she hadn't wished to change her will to leave her out and had been forced to, and handed her a wad of money without telling her that, while she wished my grandmother had a better mother, she had been the biggest mistake in her life. My grandma got her final happy moment with her mother, but also a kick in the balls. My aunt and uncle hadn't been there at all, so when they finally show up, they're taking claim to items and saying nothing must leave the house until the will is sorted. Here comes the part of the title. My grandma is the only one to try and sort out some sort of funeral for her and hope the will would allow her some cash to bury her. But as you guessed it already, Aunt and Uncle make it clear they're in charge of the will and anything to be passed around. They take charge of the funeral, pretty much shoving my grandmother out, and to add insult to injury, shortly after the service, they inform my grandma that she'd been left nothing in the will and how great-grand hadn't bothered to include her for anything at all. Just a general note here, my mom during the service had gone to my great-grandma's house and had broken in to take a couple of items she knew my grandma wanted, which was 2 photo albums, a few small rings, and 2 small statues, so my grandma actually gained some items from it all. My grandma didn't try to see if she could fight them to get anything, but pretty much gave up and just cut complete contact with them, especially after they refused to attend her own husband's funeral. So fast forward to a giant time skip to 2009, and I'm 10 going on 11, with no idea really who Aunt and Uncle, apart from they send us a Christmas card once a year and occasional birthday card, but my grandmother's health is really deteriorating. My grandma pretty much knew her time was up and had spoken more openly on her upbringing. Her family life, and who Uncle and Aunt were. Turns out Uncle had tried to reconnect when Aunt left him once again over money problems, but since himself and Aunt had reconciled, my grandma left him to his own death sentence, but Uncle knew my grandma's health had really gone downhill once again. Anyway, my grandma happens to suffer a stroke at 78, and along with having diabetes and is pretty much blind, my grandma knows her time was coming to an end quicker than we all wanted to accept. She made my parents aware that under no circumstances are we to accept Aunt and Uncle into our lives, as Aunt had been trying to call more often under the impression wanting to ensure my grandma had a will. Shortly after my grandma returns from rest care, my uncle visits her and attempts to pressure her into changing her will to ensure he's made in charge, as in his opinion, Mom will not cope with the pressures of planning your funeral and sorting out the house sale. My grandma had apparently agreed and was only stopped from doing so when she asked my dad to take her to an appointment to change the will. She told my dad her master plan, and my dad takes her to the appointment. Fast forward to the end of August, and my grandma's health rapidly declines in 24 hours to the point she was happy and healthy to being in the back of an ambulance. She's rushed to the hospital and manages to survive another 24 hours before she passes away. My mom had informed Uncle and Aunt of my grandmother's condition, but they refused to visit at all. And this sends my mom into a meltdown that she was alone in the world with 2 young children having to cope with planning a funeral. 3 days later is actually the first time I meet Aunt and Uncle in the flesh. They wanted to visit to discuss my grandma with my mom. Now, this is a little blurry to me. However, I do remember my uncle being sad about her passing away, and he did play with mine and my sister's Lego blocks with me and my sister, while Aunt did question into why my grandma had died so soon, and also if we knew if there was any cash left to them. My mom, whilst upset, answered as many questions as she could before forcing them out as they were upsetting her further. So my grandma's funeral had to be set, so it would either be held on my birthday or my aunt's son's birthday, which are 2 days apart. The parents had to choose Aunt's son's birthday as they didn't really want to be on their oldest daughter's birthday. This set a bad mood for the day as they tried to inform Aunt and Uncle of the news, but had been ignored completely. The service was held, and before it could even start, my aunt's pressuring my parent to allow myself and my sister to sit with her side of the family, My parents kept us to their side of the family and start ignoring them. After the service is when this finally blows up. We had a small get-together afterwards when people came around to celebrate my grandma's life. A lot of her friends made big deals out of my sister by giving us a memory box of possessions they had that reminded them of my grandma. This had just been given to us when Aunt starts boasting that Uncle has the power of the will and they plan to take a certain amount for all the stress it caused on them. Joke's on them, though. My dad asked them in which copy of the will was this the case, to which they reply, the last copy she ever made. See, if you remember from further back up, my grandma had changed her will, with my dad being there, and this is where my dad slams down the power moves. The changes had been to give my mom and dad full control, a small amount to be set aside for me and my sister, and the grand total of 10p to be given to Aunt and Uncle. Oh, and if they contested the will, they got nothing. Nothing at all. As you can imagine, being told that, they blew their lid, swearing and upsetting the kids in the room, and I remember being shuffled upstairs as my mom and dad kicked her out. Anyway, Aunt being a douche, she contests the will and loses the grand total of 10p left to her and my uncle. My mom, by then, had sold off a lot of possessions she didn't want to keep, and the house sale had pretty much been finalized by the time my uncle came begging for items to remember my grandma with, or to be given a small amount of money that was rightfully his, as surely as sister wanted to leave him something in the will. My mom laughed him out of her house, and that was the last time we actually saw either one of them. Why do I write this now, though? Well, it turns out in 9 years of being little to no contact, my uncle had died during the summer for us to only find out at Christmas via a Christmas card. Don't worry, though, he was surrounded by loved ones, as Aunt so gracefully put it, but neither of them had much money left. For his funeral, his children had to beg, borrow, and steal the cash to afford his funeral, and in the Christmas card, they asked if we could give them some money. Well done. As crappy as they are, nothing will tear apart a family like money. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.